An 80-year-old veteran was shoved to the ground by a group of bikers in broad daylight. What they didn't know, Jason Statham was standing just a few feet away. What he did next, without a word, changed everything. Stay with us until the end, because some men don't speak justice, they show it. The heat clung to the pavement like it had something to prove. Out on the edge of town, where the highway curved past the last row of diners and into silence, a lone gas station baked under the afternoon sun. The kind of place time forgot, where the lights above the pump still flickered even in daylight, and the ice cooler buzzed louder than the passing traffic. It was there that the old truck rolled in, coughing its way to a stop beside pump number 3. The truck, a faded 1970 F100, looked like it had seen more battles than any man could speak of. Rust gnawed at the corners, and the paint had long surrendered to the sun. When the engine cut out, the silence it left behind felt heavier than the noise it replaced. A door creaked open slowly, and the man who stepped out moved like the years weighed more than gravity. Samuel Whitmore. 80 years carved into his spine, each step a conversation with pain. His left knee didn't bend right anymore, not since Nam. But he didn't complain. He just moved, slow, steady, like the world still owed him a few more miles. With a worn leather wallet in hand and a folded veteran's discount card tucked carefully behind his fingers, he reached for the pump. The air smelled of gasoline, rubber, and resignation. Behind him, laughter rose from the shade, not warm, not shared. The kind of laughter that never carried memory, only mockery. 5 bikers leaned against their bikes, leather vests heavy with patches and empty pride. They watched Sam like he didn't belong in their world. One of them muttered something about scrap metal. Another spat near the curb. But Sam didn't react. He hadn't come this far in life just to flinch. He twisted off the gas cap with the precision of a man who once dismantled explosives. His hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from memory. They always did. Still, they worked. They always had. The laughter grew louder. Footsteps followed. One of them stepped into his space too close. Like presence alone was enough to assert dominance. Sam kept his eyes on the pump. The kind of silence that follows men like him wasn't passive. It was a choice. Then came the shove. Not a punch, not a blow meant to hurt, but one designed to erase. The kind of shove that says, "You don't matter anymore." His cane clattered to the concrete and his body followed, slowly, painfully. Knees hit first, then hands. Gravel bit into skin as blood followed gravity in thin, stubborn lines. The world tilted, but his pride didn't. No one moved. A woman across the lot turned away, dragging her child with her. Inside the mini-mart, the cashier looked up, then back down again. It was the kind of moment that should have snapped the air in two, but it didn't. The laughter returned. Cruel, empty, victorious. Sam didn't speak. He never did in moments like these. He just gathered himself like he always had, piece by piece, breath by breath, rising from the asphalt not like a victim, but like a survivor who'd gotten far too used to standing up alone. But he wasn't alone. On the far side of the station, beside Pump 5, another man had been watching. He hadn't flinched when Sam was shoved, hadn't gasped, hadn't looked away. He just watched, the way only men who've seen enough know how to. Short-cropped hair, boots that had walked through fire, eyes that didn't wander, didn't blink. Jason Statham. He didn't move right away, he didn't need to. Some storms don't start with thunder. They start with stillness. He dropped the bottle of water in his hand. The cap hit the ground and rolled in a slow spiral beneath the pump, circling like a fuse burning low. His gaze didn't shift. His breathing didn't change. But everything around him did. Something was about to happen, not for spectacle, not for revenge, but because lines once crossed demand correction. and Jason had just seen enough. Jason stepped away from the pump, 1 foot forward, slow and deliberate. The kind of step that doesn't just cross distance, it crosses a line. And when he moved, the world would too. The pavement still held the heat of the day, and the sun hadn't budged an inch. Time felt slower now, like it respected what was about to unfold. Jason crossed the lot with the certainty of a man who didn't need to raise his voice or roll his fists to be heard. His presence alone turned the laughter into static, sharp, uncertain, defensive. The bikers shifted slightly, the way animals do when something bigger enters their space. But none of them moved aside. He didn't speak. There was no need. His eyes landed on Samuel, still crouched near the pump, one hand gripping the cane like it was all that tethered him to the ground, the other hand pressed against scraped flesh and concrete dust. And yet, Sam's expression didn't ask for help. It didn't beg. It just waited, calm and full of that same quiet defiance that refused to die in men like him. Jason knelt beside him. The bikers didn't understand what that meant, how much power there is in kneeling without fear. He reached under Sam's arm, not to carry him, but to steady him. One solid hand beneath the shoulder, the other on the forearm. No rush, no words, just respect, offered without ceremony. Sam rose slowly. Jason stood with him, and still nothing was said. The bikers hesitated. The one who'd done the shoving opened his mouth, but Jason's look stopped the thought before it found breath. No threats, no dramatics. Just the kind of stare that strips a man down to the boy he once were, and exposes everything weak he tried to cover with noise and tattoos. They backed off, each step full of false bravado. The lead biker spat again, but not with confidence, with confusion. What just happened wasn't a confrontation. It was a reminder that real strength doesn't announce itself. Jason helped Sam into his truck, but the old man shook his head and pointed instead toward the trees just across the road. A small park. Bare benches, wilting grass, and a few rusted swings that squeaked even when empty. They crossed in silence, one step at a time. 2 men walking with different limps, one from age, the other from experience. No one followed. No one dared. They reached the bench near the tree line, and Sam sat slowly. Jason remained standing, scanning the edges of the park, not out of paranoia, but out of habit. He had the look of a man who measured exits without thinking. A man who'd seen too many back doors become front lines. From his shirt pocket, Sam pulled out something small and worn. A photograph. Edges curled, color faded by time and sweat. He opened it carefully, the way you handle something that still holds breath even after all the years. Jason leaned slightly to glance. 8 men, jungle in the background. Smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes, uniforms drenched in mud and memory. Sam didn't point anyone out. He didn't need to. The image spoke in ways no story ever could. Jason nodded once, not to ask questions, just to let the old man know he understood. And in that silence, something passed between them. Not friendship, not gratitude, just mutual recognition. 2 men who didn't know each other's names but knew everything that mattered. The wind shifted. Dry leaves scratched against the sidewalk. Somewhere, a lawnmower buzzed in the distance. Normal sounds, everyday life. But beneath it, something else was building. A pressure, a tightening of the air. The kind that comes before things go wrong. Jason felt it first. Not instinct, not suspicion, just awareness. And then he saw it. Across the park, past the sandlot and the crooked fence, the same group of bikers had regrouped. Their laughter was back, louder now, arrogant, and once again, their attention had found a target. Not Sam, not Jason, another man, older, thinner, on his knees by the memorial garden, a plastic trowel in one hand, sweat running down the back of his shirt. He was planting flowers around the base of the town's war monument. A gardener, maybe. Or maybe just someone who still believed the world could be made better one route at a time. The bikers didn't see his quiet contribution. They saw a bent back and slow hands. They saw weakness, and they closed in. One kicked over a watering can. Another stepped on the edge of the flower bed. The tallest one, the same who had shoved Sam, leaned in and pushed the gardener's shoulder with a smirk. The old man stumbled, nearly fell. Jason was already moving. Not fast, not loud, just forward. There are men who run to chaos with sirens in their wake. Jason wasn't one of them. He moved like a shadow that knew exactly where the light would fall. Behind him, Sam hadn't moved. He watched, calm, almost reverent, like he knew this wasn't vengeance. This was balance. Jason crossed the grass without breaking stride, and when the lead biker saw him coming, he smirked again, mistaking calm for hesitation. That would be his last mistake. Jason didn't speak. He didn't have to. The biker raised his hand to shove again. Jason's boot touched the edge of the flower bed, and in that precise second, before impact, before consequence, the park forgot how to breathe. The grass barely bent beneath Jason's steps. The sun, now tilting westward, cast long shadows that sharpened edges and deepened colors. But none of it mattered. Not to the bikers, not to the gardener on his knees, and certainly not to Jason. What mattered was that same smug look on the biker's face, the one that said he believed strength was volume, that pain only counted if it was filmed, that age meant softness, and softness was permission. The biker's hand twitched, ready to shove again. But Jason reached the flower bed first. It wasn't dramatic. There was no cinematic pause, no wind gust, no fist cocked back in warning. There was just movement, sudden, fluid, and absolute. Jason's hand didn't grab or push, it redirected. A simple shift of weight, a grip behind the wrist, and the biker's momentum betrayed him. He stumbled, arms pinwheeling uselessly, and crashed flat into the dirt, knocking over the small bag of mulch and half the row of planted daisies. The impact was silent. No one laughed this time. The others stiffened. One stepped forward, puffed up like a wolf in front of strangers, but his boots faltered on the grass. Jason turned his head, just slightly, and locked eyes with him. Not with rage, not with challenge, but with certainty. And that was worse. The biker stopped mid-step, froze, the way a man freezes when his instincts remember what pride makes him forget. Jason crouched beside the gardener, never turning his back on the group. He reached out, lifted the watering can that had been kicked aside, and placed it gently next to the old man's knee. Then, without a word, he brushed the soil off the man's forearm with the same care someone might use to dust off a folded flag. The message was clear. These men, these quiet, bent, steady men, were not invisible. Not anymore. The tallest biker clenched his fists. He didn't understand how things had flipped. How this wasn't a fight, but a correction. And how Jason wasn't threatening him. He was warning him. But pride pushes fools further than they should go. He lunged. A mistake. Jason shifted, one step back, one sidestep right. The biker's shoulder missed entirely, and the momentum spun him sideways, right into Jason's elbow. The hit was fast, surgical. It didn't need to break anything, just reset everything. The biker dropped, not unconscious, not hurt beyond repair, just grounded. And in that grounding, something changed. The confidence, the bravado, the swagger. It leaked out of him like air from a punctured tire. The remaining bikers didn't move. They didn't charge. They didn't speak. They just stood there, trapped between ego and fear. Caught in the realization that this man, this quiet stranger, had never been outnumbered. Jason didn't look at them again. He turned back to the gardener, helped him rise, and pointed toward the bench beneath the oak. The man nodded, grateful in a way that didn't need words, and began the slow walk toward safety. The bikers backed away, slowly, eyes down, pretending they hadn't just been dismantled, that what happened here didn't matter, but it did, because for once, silence had weight. Jason returned to the bench. Sam was still there, unmoved, hands folded on the handle of his cane, watching like someone reading the final chapter of a familiar book. His eyes didn't say thank you. They didn't need to. What passed between them now was something older than language, forged not in conversation, but in code. Jason sat beside him. The wind had picked up, rustling leaves across the path in slow circles. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. Not the hour, just a practice chime. The park had returned to stillness. But it wasn't the same. The gardener sat nearby now, hunched slightly, hands shaking as he tried to retie a busted shoelace. Jason watched for a moment, then reached into his boot and pulled out a spare lace, coiled tight like it had waited years for this exact use. He handed it over, quietly, completely, and just like that, dignity was restored, not with speeches or camera flashes, but with presence. Jason leaned back on the bench. The photo Sam had shown him earlier now rested between them, edges lifting in the wind. It had fallen from the old man's lap at some point, and neither of them had noticed until now. Jason picked it up. He looked at it again. The faces, the posture, the dirt, the eyes. The men in that picture had stared into the same storms Jason had walked through in his own life. Different battles, same weight. One of the faces in the corner caught his attention. Something in the angle, the smirk, the shadow behind his helmet. Jason's eyes narrowed, a thought pressed in. But before he could speak, before he could finish the sentence that was building in his mind, Sam reached into his shirt pocket again. This time, what he pulled out wasn't a photograph. It was a medal, tarnished, heavy, real. Jason looked down at it, and for a brief second, he didn't breathe. There are honors you can earn, and others you carry. This one belonged to the latter. Sam didn't offer it. He didn't explain it. He just held it out, palm open. Jason stared at it, then at the name etched on the back. And everything changed. Jason rose from the bench, the photo still in one hand, the name on the medal echoing louder in his mind than anything around him. Because now he knew. This wasn't the first time they'd tried to erase a man like Sam, and it sure as hell wouldn't be the last. The name on the medal rang through Jason's chest like a distant echo from a memory he didn't own, but understood. It was carved deep, the kind of engraving you don't make for display, but for remembrance. A name tied to sacrifice, worn like armor by a man who never expected to be noticed. Jason turned the medal once more in his hand before passing it back. Sam didn't say anything. He just took it and slid it into his front pocket like it belonged there, not for others to see, but for him to keep close, like breath. The sun was lower now, casting long bands of gold through the branches. The park was nearly empty, the silence fuller than it had been hours earlier. Not because it lacked sound, but because it carried something heavier, awareness. Jason stood from the bench, the old photo folded once and tucked into his back pocket. His shoulders straightened as he glanced across the street, back toward the gas station. The pumps still hissed softly in the distance, spitting fuel into worn tanks. Life hadn't stopped. It never did. But some moments cut through the noise. Sam rose beside him, slower than Jason, but just as steady. Two men, both marked by time in different ways, walking not as strangers, but as men who had seen enough to know when words were unnecessary. They crossed back through the grass, back through the shade, and toward the truck. The F-100 waited where it had always been, loyal, dented, unapologetic. Jason opened the door for Sam without a word, and Sam climbed in, wincing only once as his knee bent into place. Jason closed the door gently, then walked around to the passenger side, resting both hands on the edge of the truck bed. For a moment, neither moved. The same biker from earlier, the one who had pushed Sam near the pump, was still nearby. He stood by the vending machine now, helmet in hand, unsure whether to look or disappear. The bravado had drained from him hours ago, but shame still weighed on his frame. Jason met his eyes. There was no threat in his expression, no anger. Just the kind of look that burns deeper than yelling ever could. The kind that doesn't promise revenge, only that you will never forget what you did. The biker lowered his gaze. Jason turned back to Sam and tapped twice on the truck's hood. Sam started the engine. The familiar cough of old metal kicked into rhythm. It wasn't smooth, but it was alive. They drove in silence. The town passed by outside the window. Same storefronts, same cracked sidewalks. But something in the air had shifted. People glanced toward the truck. Some nodded. One older man lifted his hand to his chest. Another simply removed his hat as they passed. There were no words exchanged, no headlines, just recognition. At the edge of town, where the concrete gave way to dirt roads and telephone wires leaned toward the sky like tired soldiers, the truck slowed near a gravel turnout overlooking the hills. A single bench stood beneath a wide oak, older than both of them. Jason stepped out first, helped Sam down. Together they walked to the bench and sat without hurry. The sun had almost vanished now. Just streaks of orange remained, like the last breath of something worth remembering. Sam reached into his shirt one final time and pulled out the photo again. He didn't hand it to Jason this time. He just unfolded it and laid it flat on his thigh. His fingers lingered on one face. Then he said something not out loud, but in the stillness between them. Jason understood. That man had been his brother, not by blood, but by war. The one who never came back, whose name now lived etched on that medal, whose smile, faint in the corner of that photo, had watched over Sam all these years. Jason leaned back slowly. His jaw tightened, not from tension, but from meaning. The world often forgets the ones who held the line, but not today. A breeze picked up. And then, the biker appeared, walking, alone, no noise, no engine, no gang, just boots on gravel and helmet in hand. He didn't approach fast. He didn't speak, but he came close enough to be seen. And in his hand he held something small, a folded cloth. He stepped forward, met Sam's eyes and offered it, a gesture of apology made without the arrogance of language. Sam looked at it for a moment, then took it, not as forgiveness, but as a reminder that even the wrong ones can learn when men like Jason make sure they see. The biker nodded, turned, and left the same way he came. No one clapped, no one recorded, no headlines were written. But something had been corrected. Jason remained seated long after the sun vanished, long after the sky cooled to denim and the stars blinked awake. Sam leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on the distant lights below. He finally spoke, not aloud, not to Jason, but to the men in the photo. He folded it slowly, placed it in his jacket, and patted the pocket once, like a final salute. Jason stood, looked out over the hills, his breath slow, deep. And then he asked Sam, quietly, but clear enough to carry weight, would he come back here again? Sam nodded. Yes, because places like this weren't just about remembering the past, they were about reminding the future. Final cliffhanger-style closing line. Jason stepped back toward the road, his silhouette framed by twilight. And as he disappeared into the dark, one truth settled in the air like dust. The town would forget the day, but it would never forget the man who stood still and watched, and the one who stood up and acted. In a world that's forgotten what respect looks like, sometimes all it takes is one man to remind them. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone who never gave up even when no one was watching, subscribe now. Not for the fights, not for the fame, but to remember that real strength is always quiet.